It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Thursday, August 31st, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have sermons in the sky. It is QNA Thursday, and of course, commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? Yes, it is Thursday. I am so happy. We're at the end of the meat of the week, and tomorrow is Friday. Exciting. I can't wait to have a little bit more rest and relaxation. If you haven't yet, go ahead, leave a like and comment below to build our community. Just super happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message titled, Learn From Me. Ultimately, he came like a thief and fulfilled everything. And I hope you guys have been looking over those messages, or at least on this podcast, been listening to the word studies. All right. So it is the last day of August. How exciting is this? Tomorrow is September, guys. And you know what that means. It means my birthday's just around the corner. Yes, my birthday is coming up. I am super, actually, the weird thing is, as you get older, the birthdays, as you get older, the birthdays should mean more because you don't have that many left. You know what I mean? Because I'm, the average lifespan of a man in Canada, I think it's 83 years old, which means I have passed my halfway point. So my birthday should be more meaningful, but I am, I don't know. It's weird. It should be more meaningful, but as you get older, you don't care if you celebrate it or not. You just don't. I don't know. It's a weird thing. And, super thankful. Already some people have been buying me coffee. Yes, someone bought me 5 cups of coffee the other day. Right? Remember I told you there's that new, new website, buymeacoffee.com. You could just buy me 1 cup of coffee. And if you want it, guys, for a birthday present, I would love 1 cup of coffee for my birthday because I drink one every single day. How was your Wednesday service last night? How was the message for you guys? Put in the comments below anything that you realize or thing that you really like from it. Oh, you know what? There's something I completely forgot about. I completely forgot we've already hit 900 episodes. We're on episode 903 already, right? I completely forgot about this until someone wrote it in the comments, and then even after seeing it in the comments, I didn't really talk about it the next day either. But I'm already on episode 903, which is a big congratulations to all of us, this entire community, that we've reached 900 episodes, which is nuts. And that means that by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we're going to be hitting 1,000 episodes. So I'm not sure. You guys give me some ideas of what we can do to celebrate for 1,000 episodes, which I think is crazy. Who would have thought we were in 1,000 episodes? But yeah, I am thankful to God. We've hit 900. We're continuing strong. I'm super, super excited too. And yeah, like I said, probably January is the date when we hit 1,000 episodes. So it's quite exciting. I'm excited for this too. Today, what's happened? Oh, today I am getting my hair cut, and I'm very happy about this because my hair is out of control. When I don't meet a ton of people, right? So it's not like I'm always trying to look good here and there. The only time my hair really makes me feel like I should get it cut is when I go play sports, because the hair gets in my face and my hair, it just doesn't feel nice. It feels like I got a mop on the top of my head kind of thing. So I am happy. Right after this podcast, record this, I am going to be getting my hair cut. So I might have to do a little post on that also. How was my first day without my parents? Well, like I said yesterday, the house feels really different when there are not physical beings inside, especially when it's a bigger house. And yeah, if the house was smaller, I don't think, obviously it wouldn't feel as empty because there wouldn't be as much empty space. I get to see, I'll see all four corners of the wall and stuff like that too. But yesterday, my first day, I ate at home. All the meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, ate at home, just went out for a coffee. But then again, that's only day one and I have 13 days left. So I do think I'll be eating out pretty soon. I do think so. So, and of course I have a retreat this weekend. So for at least 3 days, I'll be eating out there also. But I'm really, really excited to get away and go to Whistler. Whistler's going to be really nice over there too. Remember the poll? I will talk about the poll today. And the poll I did write about which one do you think has the most impact, right? It's still, it's the peaceful protests have gone up to 49%. So basically half of us believe that the peaceful protest is like the most impactful. And I do believe it is super impactful. Second would be Sunday messages. And then it's the new Chief Justice in Korea is at 13%. Support of YouTube channels is 7%. And then 4% is a lawsuit against Netflix. Now, which one did I choose? I actually chose the new Chief Justice in Korea. That's the one I chose. And I guess I can't say that it's the most productive, like most impactful, because definitely I think the peaceful protest Sunday messages are definitely the two big ones. But the reason why I chose the Chief Justice is because of this week's message. It's like God does things like a thief. It's the thing that no one talks about. No one even considers it as like, oh, this huge thing that just happened. Everyone looks at the news and sees the trial and sees the peaceful protest and sees this and that. But for me, the dark horse choice, the one that I see that's really behind the scenes, but it could have a very powerful impact, is the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Because if Sunseem's trial reaches the Supreme Court, that's the person who's going to be taking over. Like he's going to be the main judge for that trial. And just from his quotes, it seems like he's the one that sees the corruption and sees that there is no trust in the judicial system in Korea. So I look at that as something very hidden, but more in the future. It's kind of behind the scenes how God is working, in secret, in private kind of thing. The peaceful protest I look at as something more for us. Like, it is giving us that now it's time to get up. It's time to rise up and shine. This kind of thing, right? And I think that's that's the most obvious one. But because of this week's message where God works like a thief, I thought this Chief Justice thing was the one it's going to eventually have the biggest impact. Just in my thoughts, that it's something that is not talked about, but it's so crazy. It's so crazy that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Korea is chosen every 6 years. And perfectly, it ends in 2023 on September 24th. So when I look at this, I'm like, whoa, this could be something that God has already been planning, right? It's already in God's plan kind of thing. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, this could be the big dark horse pick, and that's why I chose the Chief Justice. I'm not sure about you guys, and like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. These are just our own opinions and what we think. No one knows what the right answer is except for God. But one thing we do know is that all of these 5 choices that we have combined are actually that powerful. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just my personal opinion. There's no, like I said, no right or wrong or anything along that line. Today, oh man, this morning at predawn, I had a total brain fart. Like, I woke up at predawn, I closed my eyes for a second, and then 20 minutes passed by, and then I woke up right after predawn service ended. I was like, that feeling, or it's like, no, and you're like so disappointed in yourself. I'm so awake, like I can't believe this, right? And then this is where like that battle begins inside your head. And I all of a sudden I had these thoughts like, oh, you missed it, you idiot. So I might as well just go back to sleep, right? I could get up and pray, or I could just go back to sleep. And the weird thing is, the thought in my head in that moment, I'm not sure if you guys have been through this. It's like, you already messed up. You already missed predawn service. Just go back to sleep. You already failed. You're not going to have anything. It's not going to work out anyways kind of thing, right? And I was thinking like, man, this is such a default way of thinking. Especially when you're trying to do something difficult like wake up every day for predawn. You think that if you can't do it perfectly, then you shouldn't do it at all kind of thing. And on top of that, it's like no one's watching me. I'm in my bed by myself. There's no one sitting there like, hey, Sky, why don't you get up kind of thing, right? And I was like, oh, well, no one's even watching me. If I go back to sleep or if I get up to pray, no one knows what happened, right? So I was just like, ugh. And I was like, yeah, just get up. So I got up, I brushed my teeth, everything else, and then I prayed. And, but it was interesting because after doing that, you start the day and everything else. And I was watching an interview of this general of the U.S. Army kind of thing. And he was talking about the true nature of self. And I really felt that from what he said, God was speaking to me. And there's a couple things that he said that really inspired me and motivated me. And the one thing he said is, if you're a soldier, right, and your superior tells you to pick up cigarette butts, make sure everything is clean, right? And he says, any soldier can pick up cigarette butts when they are told to by a superior, right? That's just, you're doing your duty. But he said, what is your true self? Right? The true self is when you are just walking down the street and you see a cigarette butt on the ground and no one is around and no one can see you. No one sees what you've done, right? But it's about the true self. If you truly believe that this should be done and you should clean things, then that person, even though no one is watching, will pick up that cigarette butt and put it in the garbage, right? But if you're just doing it for duty, that's a completely different thing. And it made me feel like, wow, then, like, it's true. That situation with me at predawn, no one's watching me, right? What is the true self? The true self is like, no, even though I might have woken up late, I still got to pray. I need that time between me and God. And I still got up. And that feeling that when I heard this general speaking like this, it inspired me like, no, I'm not alone. I'm not by myself. God is watching me and he sees all the things that I do, even when I'm alone and no one else sees. And it was kind of like God tipping his hat to me saying, I saw you. I saw what you did, right? And not in a bad way. It's just like, yeah, you prayed and I met with you. And through that interview, it was like God was speaking to my heart saying, yeah, that's the true self. And I think this is such an important thing that we should think about. It's about understanding the true self or who you are or who you really want to be, right? Because, obviously we're not all fully developed. We're not completely made yet, right? So it's about who you are and who you want to be. And I always think that we need to make boundaries, right? Those lines. Finding your boundaries is the things that you'll do and you'll not do. The lines that you will never cross kind of thing, right? Like I told you guys before, there's certain lines I cross is like, hey, I'll never stop believing in God. I'll never stop believing in Jesus. I'll never stop believing in this issue. There's these lines that I can't cross, right? Don't commit the fault. I'm not going to cross that line, right? And finding out the type of person you really are or want to be. And that's more about being happy with yourself, being someone that you're happy about. It's kind of like the protests. In the protests, it's so refreshing to see people standing up and testifying for this history in public, because that's something that's always inside our hearts. Like how much we really, really wanted to just sometimes be open about our faith to our parents, to our friends, to our work, to everyone out there, and just testify because this is who we are. And that's the reality. And that's it. This is who we are. But we were afraid. The circumstances weren't, quite perfect for it, or we didn't want to face the repercussions. But when I thought about this a little bit more deeply, I thought like, if you really, really thought about it, if someone finds out you're in Providence and then they fire you from your job because of what you believe in, do you really want to work in a place like that? Or if someone stops being friends with you because you're in Providence, do you really want to be friends with someone like that? Like, I thought to myself, like, man, have I ever thought about it from that angle? Or have I just been more of, that I talked about yesterday about public humiliation, not being afraid of what people think about me. But I thought, like, yeah, do I really want those types of friends? Do I really want to be at that type of job if they're going to fire me or drop me as a friend because of what I believe in? And this is what I was thinking about today after doing, missing that predawn service, but then getting up to pray. It was about being true to yourself and who you are and not being ashamed, right? And I think this is the best way to live. And you can see, look at the early Christian church. They had the option. You either believe or you die, right? You had a choice. Either you reject this gospel, you hide, or you're going to die, right? And these people would rather die than compromise themselves, knowing who they are, the true self. And I was thinking about myself too, because I realize that as I get older, like I'm now in my 40s, the older you get, the more you don't care about what others think. Right? And that's why when you look at like grandmothers and grandfathers, they don't care about name brands. They don't care about the way that they look to other people. Grandmother and grandfathers, they've just been through so much in life. They don't care what other people think, right? And yet the older you get, the more you don't care about what others think. And it's not saying that I don't care at all, but I definitely care less than when I was younger. And I realized that when you're coming into your own, knowing who you are, the true self, and or the person you really want to be, I was like, man, why do I have to wait to become so much older to have this epiphany or realization that I don't care what people think? And I think it should be happening much earlier in life, like even in your 20s. But I thought to myself, I was like, partly I think it's people will start realizing a lot later in life because it's not like the past. In the past, like during the time where people were dying much earlier, people were having babies earlier. Like women were having babies right after having, like going through their, getting their first period. It means that they're able to have babies by that time, at that point. And they were having babies right away because everyone was dying so early, right? Which means you had huge responsibilities from such a young age, right? And you grow up much quicker. And when I look at today's society, it's much different because people are way too comfortable, right? They're too comfortable to even think about those types of things of, doing this or dying. Who is a true self? But now, especially even with social media, people think way too much about what others think about them. And I do think that all of us too, like that are listening here, I think it's something we should think about. Holding yourself to a standard for yourself, not for others. Like knowing yourself is, if I'm going to be super happy about myself and who I am, one of the things that we probably feel guilty about is when we miss predawn. But imagine you wake up and you're a little bit late and then you don't pray. And then when you wake up later, you still feel guilty again, like, oh, I should have prayed. Where you're like, man, that's the person I want to be. And I think that's something that we have to kind of hold ourselves to, that what type of person do I really want to be, regardless if people are watching me or not. Regardless if I miss predawn, no one's going to know anyways, type of thing, right? And I think that's something that we have to look at ourselves and say, look, what kind of person do I really want to be? And if I really want to be that type of person, I got to hold myself to that standard. Where even, some people hold themselves to a certain standard. It's like, yeah, I'm in Providence. So what? What, you're going to stop being friends with me? Because if you're going to stop being friends with me because of this, then I would never want you as a friend anyways. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, there's a lot of things that we need to think about of what is the real self, or what is the true nature of life, where you look at the people around you, you see the standards that they have, and they're gonna. This is something that a lot of successful people say is, you can see how successful you will become by the people you hang around with, or the types of people you put around you, right? And if you have the people around you that are lazy, you have the people around you that don't really care, you have the people around you that are doing things at their own way or whatever, this is where you're going to get to see yourself and say, oh, that's what I'm going to be like in the future too. But do you really want to be like that? And it makes a lot of sense, because birds of a feather flock together. If you put people around you that don't hold themselves accountable to themselves and to the life they really want to live, it's kind of you saying like, oh, yeah, I want those types of people around me because I don't want them to hold me accountable either. But I think it's much, much better to have the people around you that you want to become like. Because if they hold themselves accountable, they'll hold you accountable, you'll hold them accountable, and you'll have that sense of like, yeah, I really want to be this type of person. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that we really have to look at and think about in a much deeper sense, because I was just like going, yeah, the way I want to live, the way that I want to be is not going to be about, is not dependent upon whether someone's watching or not. And, even when I listened to that interview I was telling you, like when I heard that, it was like, God, you just told me, like when I listened to it, I was like, it really resonated with me. But the biggest thing it said to me was, God was watching. It's like, hey, even though not a single person was there around you, even though if you went back to sleep, no one would have seen it, God is there and God is watching and God is seeing both the good and the bad. And I really hope that all of us too will have that mentality and mindset to hold ourselves like truly accountable to who we are and who we want to be. So, I think people sometimes have to take a good look, not just at themselves, but also with the people they put around themselves. Because when you look at that, you'll have a good idea of what your life is going to be like too, right? So I found that to be quite interesting, interesting realizations, and I guess another mental exercise from just this experience that I had this morning at predawn. But something that's kind of interesting is, being able to share this type of stuff on this podcast, I find it very inspiring because I feel like I'm paying it forward. Now, what does that mean? Well, when I first came to Providence, I had a lot of great leaders above me. And one thing that I really, really admired them for was their ability to experience something and then to realize through it. And like I had like I had this one head leader, they call him The Voice. It's PJ, right? So there's Pastor John over there in LA. He was one of my first head leaders. And the one thing I admired so much, and I was like, how did he do that? Was like, I listened to him lecture a lot. He's a great lecturer. And when he lectured, he would talk about something that happened to him on that day. And then as he's talking about it, he starts to share this realization that he had. And then I'd be like, what? Like, how the heck do you realize like something so deep about God from an experience you just had that morning? And then he puts it into a lecture and you're like, what? That is so nuts, kind of thing, right? And for me, I was just like, that inspired me so much that it helped me to really hone my skills and to really think about that even more deeply. Like, yeah, that's how I need to live too. I can't just live in a regular way. I can't just experience things in life and just say, oh, well, that's an experience and then move on with life. But, having those people that were before me, my ancestors of faith, I guess you can call that, I would listen to them, learn, I would be envious, like, wow, I want to be able to do that one day. And now that, I've kind of reached I've reached a level myself where I'm capable of doing these types of things. I think it's something that I feel like I'm paying it forward, that, yeah, I experienced this. I realized this through my experience. And then it's really interesting because people would text me, DM me, or write in the comments. They're like, whoa, how did you, that was really deep. How'd you realize this? How'd you realize that? And for me, that's why I love sharing these mental exercises and these realizations I have from my experiences. So that's why I find this kind of cool. Like, it's all cycling back where I was the one looking up to my leader and saying, whoa, how'd they do that? And then it inspires me to want to try to live and think that way. But now here I am in that exact same position. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's just very, very interesting. Either way. So, that's the first segment for today. Hope you guys enjoyed that. So let's get into our first break of the day.
Yeah, rise up to the challenge, armed with the word in action, belt to the truth, fasten, shield of faith in one hand, sword of the spirit I'm slaying, no mercy I'm praying, everyone thinks I lost, but now I'm turning Super Saiyan, I gotta be new, gotta be great, I only gotta win this thing, fix the mistakes, fix who I am, all I wanna do is change, gotta be brave, gotta be tough, no more time for delaying, it's just training, all those times of pain, off. pushing my limits, only with God. I'm trying to be better, I'm trying to feel God. Enemies watching, they want you to fall, but you have to be better, you have to give it your all. Every day I make myself, but I know it's not easy. This is the life I chose and I know my spirit's breathing. The battle has only begun and I may take damage, but if I fall, all I know how to do one thing. Rise up to the challenge, armed with the word in action. Belt to the truth, fasten. Shield of faith in one hand, sword of the spirit I'm slaying. No mercy, I'm praying. Everyone thinks I lost, but I'm turning Super Saiyan. I'm Goku turning Super Saiyan. I'm charged up, now I'm playing. On the mount like Sinai, I connect with God like Wi-Fi. Receive the word, always praying. Spiritual path where I'm staying. Everyone thinks I lost, but I'm always with him, so you know I'm prevailing. Protecting myself from Satan, armed with the truth, now my angels will shoot like. Now I'm at my truest form. I'm trying to really be the greatest. The power level can't contain it. My energy is never draining. Look how far we have made it. Unlocking levels, never hesitated. There's no try, you can just do it or don't. So fix your thoughts instead. Everybody makes mistakes, just gotta take notes. Can afford to do it again. Life is so easy if you just do what is right and just follow what's real. Victory comes through skill. Gotta stay on course, time to kill. Now's the time to rise and shine. Thinking of the past and never forget. God is Lord, by your side, holding your hand, dry your eyes. Trust in the Lord every night and day. He'll never let you go, don't fall away. Be bold, be brave, and with all your heart. Love the Lord to the end of time. Rise up to the challenge, armed with the word in action. Held to the truth, fasten. Shield of faith in one hand, sword of the spirit I'm slaying. No mercy, I'm praying. Everyone thinks I lost, but I'm turning Super Saiyan.
All right, so let's get into today's QNA Thursday. And of course, yes, every Thursday we are taking your questions. And we have two interesting questions today. Well, two sets of questions. Well, two people asking questions, and let's get right into them. So the first question is coming from a member who has questions from a newcomer. And it has to do with the rapture lesson. And the first question is, why is 3.5 years before and after the rapture so important? So the rapture was in 2015, and we know that before that, 3.5 years before the rapture, we started, we were having like 1 a.m. prayers, and we were like setting massive conditions for it, right? So 3.5 years before, 3.5 years after the rapture, very, very important. The first one, 3.5 years before, is to do what? Is to prepare and set the condition for the rapture itself, right? So this is the logic and reasoning behind it. I'm not sure if I'm giving you the exact answer, but from what I remember, before is preparation. Before is setting the condition so that the rapture can actually happen, right? So that's the time we spent preparing for the rapture, okay? And the 3 years after is to solidify the rapture. What does that mean? Well, once we received the rapture, it was all about the 100 line. And then after the 100 line, it was the 300 line. Then after the 300 line, it was the 700 line. Then after that was the 1,000. And then he's like, you can go up to 10,000, which basically means it's never ending. However, it's like anything else in life. When you're starting something new, number one is you need, let me give you a great example is like if you're going to have a baby. If you're going to have a baby, the time before having a baby, there's a lot of preparation, whether it's preparing a room, buying diapers, a crib, whatever it is, making sure everyone's eating healthy, good lifestyle, exercise, like just a ton of stuff you have to think about when it comes to life before having a baby, right? So the before time is very, very important. And then of course, right after the baby is born, that time there is super important too, because now you're adjusting to this new lifestyle of having a baby, learning how to take care of the baby, learning how to raise the baby, when to feed, how to feed, what's the best way to do this and that. And it was just like the same thing with the rapture. After the rapture, we hit the rapture, that time was set, like boom, we just had the wedding, right? The wedding has started and boom, it started. So like, yes, there it is. The wedding has started. But however, after the wedding, you have the honeymoon. And after the honeymoon, life begins again. It's not going to be so easy. The honeymoon is easy because you're in super love mode, right? That's the passion, desire, the love, the feelings. Nothing can stop you. You're not going to fight. It's just going to be so amazing during the honeymoon stage. But when you get back home and it comes back to living the life properly, what happens next? Well, that's the hard part. It's really, really hard because now you have to deal with mortgages, rent, bills, electricity, like working. All these things come into play and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what life really is like after the wedding, right? And it's the same thing with the rapture too. When you spent all that time preparing for the rapture, and we spent crazy amounts of time, right? Going through 1 a.m. prayer and like not watching media, not drinking coffee, all these, it was really, really strict. But then after the rapture happened, it's like, okay, so this is the life that we're supposed to live. What does it mean to be raptured? How do we raise our level till we reach at least the 700 or at least the 1,000 level? And it's adjusting and getting used to this new life that we are living and maturing as someone who is raptured. Right? It's just like an adult. An adult is usually after 18 years old, right? So if you're an adult after 18, even though you become 18 years old, you just came out of being like a teenager. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden when you hit 18, everything magically you become mature. No, you need to experience life. You need to take in responsibility. And there's so many things that you're learning and growing in maturity, right? And in the same way, that's what it felt like too with the rapture. We start off with 100, which is just to believe. Absolutely believe in the one that God has sent. Believe in this time period. Boom. That's 100 line. And once you hit 100 line, you reach this 300 line. It has to do with like using the soul level. And there's like so many different requirements that you see that, oh, this is what it means that I've reached the 300 level because I'm doing these types of things. Oh, 700 level is like this, right? And that the 3.5 years after is that important, right? So that time is already passed. So the people that are being raptured right now, there is no such thing as a 3.5 years before and a 3.5 years after for those that are rapturing right now. Why? Because the time of the rapture has passed. 3.5 years before was that ultimate preparation. So for now, what does that 3.5 years before and after symbolize? Right? It's more of a symbol to the people who are newcomers, who are preparing for rapture right now. So let's just say that you're learning the word and you finish and you pass the word, let's say in June or July, or like right now in August. And then we know that the next 316 is that symbolic day where the new batch of people will be raptured into the sky on 316, right? So when you think about this, it's like, oh, so then I have this time now until 316 to really, really prepare myself and set the right conditions so that I can be raptured. And then after you rapture, you have that time you need to adjust after too. But it's not going to be literally 3.5 years before, 3.5 years after. Why? Because most newcomers don't even know about the rapture, so they're not preparing 3.5 years in advance, right? Most people are learning the word, they realize this history, and then after that, they're like, wow, I need to get raptured, but they're not going to spend 3.5 years preparing for that rapture, right? They could be raptured in 3 months. They could be raptured after 6 months, but they're not going to wait 3.5 years, right? So that's kind of like, yeah, that's the reason why the 3.5 years was so important before and after. Now, the next question that this newcomer gave is, if a person is completing physical rapture and able to spiritually rapture the coming year of 316, right? So let's just say that they passed right now, and then 316 is coming up, so they're preparing for that. However, let's just pretend, so this is a question for the newcomer, what if the man of mission dies before the next 316? Which means the door of the rapture closes. Can the spirit of that person still rapture to the golden city of heaven? Now, I don't have an answer for this because Sunseem's never talked about it. Because that's a very, very specific and specialized question. Yes, it's true. The door of the rapture closes when the man of mission dies. That is true, right? So the question here is, what if someone realizes and passes, but then 316 hasn't come by yet, but then the man of mission dies before the 316 comes? Does that person rapture or not? Now, in my mind, just my personal opinion is I think that person would still rapture. That sounds reasonable because they realized while the man in mission was still living. However, I am not sure, right? There may be something that, maybe something before he passes away, he will say something about it, right? But as of right now, we have no idea. And if you are someone who is like a newcomer right now, I wouldn't worry about it right now, right? But I would be more worried about it later on, where when Sunseem hits like 100 years old, you're like, whoa, this could be something happening, or he's in the hospital or something along that line because he's sick or has a disease or whatever it is, right? So I'm not sure about that question. But one thing it should make us feel is that urgency in our hearts to make sure we rapture quickly while we're living right now, right? Like it's something that if it's like, that's a question I never thought about, but this newcomer is asking. Is like, wow, what a great question. Now, if you're a newcomer right now, I wouldn't worry about it. And that's a question that a newcomer shouldn't be thinking about unless they think that Sunseem's going to die sometime soon this year, right? Which I don't think that's going to happen. But what we do see is that, it's a great question for the future, but it helps us to realize the value of the rapture, because let's just say, what if it is true that the moment he dies and then no one can rapture after that, even if they've realized in past? That would be a hard thing, right? But it's a definite line. Like it's a strong line that's like, yeah, you can, it's done. So you gotta, everyone right now has to prepare the best that they can, making sure that they are ready, prepared, that they rapture, and that they will continue to be raptured more and more each and every day. And for me, I wouldn't even be surprised if Sunseem passed away on 3/16. Just the way how God works, I'd be like, I wouldn't be surprised if he passed away on 3/16 either, right? So it is something that is a very, very good question, but I don't really have an answer for that one. We're not going to know until Sunseem talks about that one. But if you're a newcomer right now, I would say I wouldn't really worry about that at this moment. Just prepare well, do your best, because I don't think Sunseem's going to be dying anytime soon. Right? Looking at his health, how healthy he is, how much he played sports, how well he eats and stuff like that, I don't think any of us have to worry about that one at all, right? So, yeah, if you're talking to your newcomer, make sure that that they don't worry about that right now. But it is a good question for the future. Like, it's a very specific question, and I think I don't think it'll be answered until much later. I don't think so, because I don't think it'll be answered until later, where sometimes. If Sunseem is sick, he's in the hospital, and then people are like, oh my gosh, am I going to rapture or not? Then Sunseem will answer that. But right now, I don't think it's something that they need to really worry about either. All right? So that is the first question when it comes to about the rapture, and that's coming actually from a newcomer. So a member is asking on behalf of a newcomer. The second question has to do with this week's message, and the person wrote, can you explain sun, moon, and stars? I never learned this parable well, right? And it's either people have never learned it, or they probably learned it, but they just don't remember everything in detail, right? For them to be inspired by it. So, sun, moon, and stars, very, very powerful parable, because it's talking about this time we're living in right now too. But it's the same. The prophecies are both in the Old Testament and New Testament, which means that this same prophecy was fulfilled at Jesus' time and at this time right now. So in the Old Testament, you'll have two verses that talk about the sun, moon, and stars, which is Joel chapter 2, verse 30 and 31, and chapter 3, verse 15. So in the book of Joel, it references sun, moon, and stars twice. It says the sun will turn dark, the moon turns blood red, and also the stars no longer shine or they fall from the sky, right? And of course, that's the same as this week's scripture of Matthew chapter 24, verses 29, right? Verse 29 to 30, I believe. And that is, it's the exact same prophecy, which means that the Old Testament is prophesying about the first coming, and the New Testament is prophesying about the second coming. Okay, so what does it mean that the sun, moon, and stars, sun turns dark, the moon turns to blood, and the stars no longer shine? What does that actually mean? Now, is it a literal thing? Obviously not, right? Because the moon, how does the moon turn to blood? That makes no sense there, right? That's red, right? Because if the sun turns dark, then the moon turns dark because the moon basically reflects the light off the sun, right? And the stars no longer shine. That kind of makes sense if the sun turns, if the sun turns dark, right? But what does this actually mean? This parable, right? So this is a prophecy about the first coming, and that when Jesus comes, this sign of sun, moon, and stars will be fulfilled. However, when you look at what actually happened when Jesus came, it did not happen, right? These things didn't happen when Jesus came. So in order to understand the Bible, the thing we need to know is we need to understand the Bible through the Bible, right? The Bible has the questions and the answers. So, let's take a look at one of the scriptures where the Bible actually answers or interprets the sun, moon, and stars. And this came from the Sunday message, which is Genesis chapter 37, verses 9 through 11. So Joseph basically has a dream that the sun, moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. Very, very easy to interpret this. Why? Because when you say 11 stars is his 11 brothers, right? And what's even more interesting is his father Isaac, central figure, when his father heard about Joseph's dream, he interpreted it instantly. And he said, "Will I, your mother, and your brothers bow down to you?" So already when Joseph said, "The sun, moon, and stars bow down to me," the father said, "Will I, the father, your mother, and your brothers bow down to you?" Which means he interpreted sun, moon, and stars as father, mother, children. Right? That is interpretation, right? So now that the Bible's told us the interpretation of what the sun, moon, and stars are, the sun is the father, the moon is the mother, and the stars are the children. So then we have to get into, well, what does it mean then? That if the sun is the father, what does it mean the sun turns dark, the father turns dark, the moon turns blood, the mother turns blood red, and the children lose their light? What does that mean? So what we need to do next is we need to magnify it to the level of a nation. Right? So when Joseph received his dream, Joseph's dream was at the level of family, father, mother, children. However, in Joel chapter 2 and 3, it's not talking about the family level because the family is not receiving the Lord. It is the nation of Israel that receives the Lord. So we have to magnify this interpretation into the level of Israel or the national level. All right? So how do we magnify the sun, moon, and stars to the national level? Well, all we need to do is take a look at the father, mother, and children and look at the roles that they play, because they're symbolizing the sun, moon, and stars. So the father is what type of role? The father is a leader of the household, but not just any leader. He is the external leader of the family, like the sun, out in the daytime, just blazing, giving the heat, giving sustenance to the earth, right? And the father is the external leader, the one that is seen. Everyone takes the name of the father, right? That is something where you look at that, it's like, oh, okay, so the father is the son, the external leader, the one that's bright, shining. Everyone sees the father as the head of the household, okay? Now, what about the mother? Is the mother a follower then? No, the father and mother are on the same level. Father and mother are both leaders. However, they play different roles in the family. So the mother is like the moon. The moon comes out at night. It's hidden. It's not as bright. It's reflecting the light of the sun. The mother is the internal leader that does things behind the scenes. That's why the moon comes out at night. It's behind the scenes. It doesn't mean they're less. It just means they have a leadership role behind the scenes, internal leader, right? So the sun is blazing during the day, provides light and warmth for everyone, just like the father is the head of the household, right? And the father lays down the laws of the household and actually gives the punishments, right? That's what the father does. Now, the moon comes out at night, the internal leader, softer light, reflects the light of the sun to the earth in the night. The mother plays the role of internal leadership, the mediator, keeping the household, raising the children, right? And the mother isn't the one that lays down the law. The father does that, but usually the mother is the one that explains. The mother is the one that helps out when the children don't like the father for spanking them. The mother will explain, this is what you've did. This is what you've done. You have no idea what your father went through because he was waiting for you all night, yada, 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 right? So the mother is the wise, the inspiring, the graceful, the one that keeps the family together, the internal leader. Right? Which leaves only the stars left. And who are the stars? The stars are the children, or at a national level, the stars are the people. right? The Jews, right? So let's get into it at that level. So then, who is the father, mother, and children of Israel? Okay, so who is the external leader and the internal leader and the followers? Well, let's take a look at the son first. The father, the external leader, the one that everyone looks up to, the one that lays down the law, the one, the one that is like the one in charge. Well, in the Old Testament time, the son or the external leader that everyone followed for 4,000 years was Moses. And that's why you look at a verse in like John chapter 8, verse 28 and 29. This is when the religious leaders turn to the Jesus and his disciples and says, hey, you follow this Jesus guy. We are disciples of Moses, right? Moses is the one that we follow because Moses was the leader of the Old Testament time, like the savior of the Old Testament time. He set the rules. He brought the 10 commandments, right? Moses is the son. Now, who are the mothers of Israel? Well, the mothers are the ones that are softer. They do not set the law, but they uphold the law. They are the religious leaders. So the religious leaders are still in a leadership role, but they're not Moses. They don't make the laws, right? They're not the ones that brought the laws to the people. They're the ones that uphold them. They study them and explain it to people. So whenever people had a question, they came to the religious leaders to ask them, what does Moses require for this? What did Moses say about this? What do I give for a sin offering? What did Moses say about a wave offering, right? And they would say, yeah, and the religious leaders would be the moon, the internal leaders that would be explaining to the people exactly what they needed to do and what Moses' laws were. Now, the stars, obviously I talked about this before, they are the Jews, the people of Israel. So now we have it. The sun, moon, and stars are set. The sun is Moses, the moon are the religious leaders, and the stars are the Jews, the Israelites. Okay? So what's next is, how do we interpret this prophecy that the sun turns dark, the moon turns blood red, and the stars fall from the sky? Well, I'll give you a perfect example in John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Now, this is a very famous story where the religious leaders come to Jesus, and Jesus is teaching in the temple courts, and then the religious leaders come, and they bring a woman caught in adultery, and they say, hey, guess what? What do you do? And they're trying to trap Jesus because they're trying to show people that he's phony, okay? But in the end, it's that very famous line that Jesus says is, you who is without sin, cast the first stone, and then no one casts a stone, and he basically saves this woman, okay? So how does this show that the sun, moon, and stars were being fulfilled? The sun turns dark, the moon turns blood red, and the stars fall from the sky. Very easy. Let's take a look at the scene. Once again, John chapter 8, verse 1 through 11. What is the scene? Jesus is teaching in the temple courts to the people of Israel. The people of Israel are the stars. So now we have the stars are present. The people are listening to Jesus preach. All of a sudden, religious leaders come with the woman caught in adultery. Religious leaders are the moon, right? So now you have the moon and the stars here. Now, verse 5 is very interesting because when they come to trap Jesus, they said to Jesus, hey, Moses tells us to stone such a woman. So whose name do they invoke? The Father. So in this one story, the sun, moon, and stars are all present. They invoke the name Moses told us to stone such a woman. Who's saying it? The religious leaders, which are the moon. And who are they talking to? They're saying all of this in front of all the people, which are the stars. Okay? So here they are trying to trap Jesus. How are they trying to trap Jesus? Well, basically, they're like, Jesus is someone that taught about forgiveness. Forgive each other. More than anything else, you got to forgive each other. And they come in and say, well, Moses told us to kill such a person. So why is Jesus trapped in this situation? Because if Jesus says, then do what Moses says and stone her, then they'll come against him and say, oh, but you're someone that preaches about forgiveness and mercy. Oh, you're a hypocrite. So they could go against him on this side. However, on the flip side, if he said, hey, you should forgive him, they can turn to Jesus and say, oh, how dare you go against Moses? How dare you say things against Moses? Ah! And no matter what answer Jesus gave, he would be caught on one side. That's why it's a trap. He'd be caught on one side or the other. So can you imagine all the stars, which means all the people of Israel are watching this scene unfold in front of them. They're like, whoa, what is going on right here? They see the most respected rabbis, the most respected religious leaders that they love so much, these internal leaders. And then they invoke the name of Moses, like, oh, they just said Moses' name. And then you see Jesus, who they also respect, like, what is going on? What's Jesus going to say? So, of course, we know that Jesus starts writing something in the sand. And they kept bothering Jesus, like, Jesus, say something, say something. What do you say to this? What do you say to the things we're saying? And Jesus said that one of the most famous lines is, you who is without sin, cast the first stone. And then it became silent. And the stars are watching. And the moons are like, oh, we weren't expecting that answer. And then verse 9, it says, they left one by one, starting with the eldest first. And that is a huge thing, that the eldest left first, because the eldest, the elders are the ones that are most revered, know the Torah, know the Old Testament better than anyone else. For them to leave first means that the younger people also lose their power. Why? Because if the older ones who are wiser, more respected, know the Bible more than they do leave, they have no choice but to leave also. And can you imagine how these religious leaders felt? They came there coming in to trap him. But instead, Jesus says something that they can say nothing about. And they had their tail caught between their legs. And why? What does it mean the moons turned red? Red is either you blush or you're angry when you turn red. And that was both for the moons. The religious leaders were so angry, like, but so embarrassed at the same time, that in front of all the people, the stars, that they were embarrassed by this Jesus person, even when they invoked the name of Moses, right? So here it is. They fulfilled the prophecy of the sun, moon, and stars, right? Moses was the sun, and the religious leaders invoked his name to trap Jesus, but in the end, they couldn't trap Jesus, and someone greater than Moses was there, right? Even though they thought to themselves it was a foolproof plan. And the religious leaders who were there thinking that they got Jesus and that they wanted to show all the stars that they were following a fool, someone who wasn't even true, instead of trapping Jesus, they were embarrassed and angry, which means the moon turns blood red, right? And finally, the stars fall from the sky, or they lose their light. Remember, the stars, their light comes from Moses. But now that someone greater than Moses comes, their light begins to dim. And they're like, oh my gosh, these religious leaders, what are they doing? Are they saying that Jesus is the Messiah? They couldn't trap Jesus. They couldn't, all that knowledge and all these great people, these great leaders that they followed all their life, they start to lose their light. And the stars begin to lose their light, their faith in their leaders, and they start to put their faith in Jesus, right? So basically, the ultimate meaning is, when the Old Testament ends, the Old Testament sun, who is Moses, begins to set, and a new sun begins to rise, which is Jesus. And the new sun always outshines the old sun, which was Moses. Moses was setting so that it becomes dimmer and dimmer, and the new sun keeps getting brighter and brighter. The prophecy of the sun, moon, and stars was about the old time period not accepting the new time period. And the religious leaders went against Jesus and ended up being embarrassed by him. And this kind of reminds me of another verse in the Bible, in Matthew chapter 21, verse 42 to 44. It's this prophecy that comes from Psalms that says, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, right? Which means that this stone, which is Jesus, they thought he was nothing, so they tried to get rid of him. But instead, Jesus has become the cornerstone, the most important stone of this new house, of the New Testament that was being built. And then in verse 44, it says, anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and anyone on whom it falls will be crushed, right? And that's what happened to the religious leaders of that time. Instead of following and believing in Jesus, instead what happened was they were crushed, or they were broken to pieces by Jesus instead, right? And of course, it wasn't literal. It was by the word, right? The words were greater. The words were better and such too. So that is this is the prophecy of the sun, moon, and stars. And like I said, this is happening today also. Just as it says in Matthew 24:29, when it talks about the Lord's second coming with the sun, moon, and stars, sun system also is being rejected today by the old time period, by the religious leaders of the new time period. And instead, they are being embarrassed instead. Okay? So there it is, guys. That is the second question, which has to do with the sun, moon, and stars. Hope it's something that you guys really enjoyed and kind of refreshes your heart and your mind of that Bible study. Okay? All right, so there it is. That is the end of Q&A Thursday. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. Let's move into our second break of the day. Okay, so let's get into our final segment of today on this Thursday podcast, and we have Sermons in the Sky. It gives me a chance to keep my sermon chops, keep practicing it so that eventually when it comes time, I will be able to do it in the future when I need to. But, this is one of the things I love to do, which is preaching the word, the gospel. I was going to say talking. I love talking. But that's obvious because I'm doing a podcast where I'm by myself talking to a wall and putting it onto YouTube. So today I don't have a very long Sermons in the Sky, but there's this one thing that I was thinking about when it came to this week's Sunday message. And one of the things it did say that inspired me was, if you don't know, you'll keep waiting. Even after Jesus dies, right? So here it's very interesting because it talks about the New Testament time is people had no idea that Jesus was there, right? They had no idea the value. They had no idea that the Messiah had come. And because of that, even when the Messiah was right in front of their face, they kept waiting. And even after Jesus died, they were still waiting. And they were like, these are the people waiting for that very person. But now they're kind of acting crazy like, oh, he's here. But then they're not doing anything about it. They're just constantly waiting. And the thing that kind of struck me when I was thinking about this week's Sunday message is just that point is you'll keep waiting. And I was trying to think about what did that mean for us as brides of this history. Could we be those that are still waiting also? And we're like, well, you can't really be waiting because we've already found him. So we're already in this history, so we're not waiting anymore. But I thought about it as like a little bit more like to miniaturize it into our personal life. What does it mean that if you don't know, you'll keep waiting? And I realized that if we don't know the words properly, if we don't know the principles, if we don't know the word deeply of this new time, the new words of this time period, then we'll keep waiting. But we're like, well, what does it mean to keep waiting? Well, we're not waiting because we found the person that God has sent. But the realization I had of if we don't clearly know the word, we'll keep waiting. It means we will keep waiting on ourselves. What does that mean? It means that we will wait to take action. We will not have the urgency. We will not testify. We will not live the life that we're supposed to live. And even when we're in this history, because we don't know the words clearly, we don't know the value, we don't have that inspiration, we will not take action, and we are kept in waiting too. And I think this is something that's really important for all of us also, where sometimes we feel like, well, what's next? What's next? What do I do in this history? Where we're already receiving the words each and every week and each and every day. So if we're already receiving those words, what does that mean? The question is, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for to take action in your life? It doesn't mean going out to campus and going to evangelize when you're like a full-time worker in the career department. It means that even as a member of society, even as a member of church, even as a member of your department, how long will you wait before you start taking action in this history? Think about this. These peaceful protests, it's 2023, 45 years after this history has began. It's taken us 45 years to stop waiting and actually taking action in public. 45 years. And for all of us here too, what about our lives? Taking action on the word, listening to the word, going to predawn, going to the services, and and understanding the value of it so deeply that we're sitting there like, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. And I think that's something that we have to kind of put into our hearts and minds and say to ourselves is, the reason why we keep waiting is because we don't clearly know the word. Because when you don't know the word well, we don't understand, we don't realize, we don't value. And I hope that we, as brides of this history, that we will know the words more deeply, know it really well, so that we stop ourselves from waiting, but we go out and take action right away, living the life that we're supposed to live. One of the things that I do think that people in Providence do too well is we hide ourselves from public. Like we try to show ourselves as just regular, normal people. But when I look at a lot of people from the former faith that I know even now, they're shining so brightly. The way that they live, the morals that they stand by, the things that they will not do, they refuse to do, the things that they will do, which is different from people in the world. Yeah, they show themselves as people separate from this world. And I think that's something that we need to think about too is, are we trying to blend into the world, or are we trying to shine the light of Christ to everyone else in this world so that they see that there is hope, that there is a way for them to be happier, there's a way for them to have more meaning and fulfillment. And I think it all starts at the word. It all starts with the Word, knowing the Word, realizing from the Word, understanding the Word, so that we stop waiting on ourselves and we start to take action. So yeah, that's kind of the realization I had from this week's message. This one part that came from the message, and it really resonated with me, saying like, yeah, that makes sense, because we're still waiting too, where a lot of us are just not taking action, and we're just going to wait until when? We're always going to be in the waiting mode. But I hope that we can listen to the words deeply, and instead of being those that are hidden, that will come out, just like these peaceful protests, will come out and say, yeah, this is who we are. And I testify that this is a great place to be. All right? So there it is, guys. That is the Sermons in the Sky for today. I hope it's something that really touched your heart also. And I hope it's something that all of us can really stop waiting and push ourselves to reach a new level. Okay, so there it is. That is the end. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. Have a wonderful Thursday. That's the end of this podcast. I can't wait for tomorrow because it's Friday. So see you guys tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm